Hey, welcome to Top Agent Training. I am Kurt, Inspector of Coffee. This might go a little long, I hope not. I should grab my water. But asbestos is a lot to know. I'm not gonna go too deep. I really just wanna keep it succinct to what you as a realtor needs to know with kind of the high level stuff. So sometimes with asbestos, it's easier to talk about what's not true because you can even go to like Facebook groups full of home inspectors and property inspectors, and they don't know what they're talking about. And it's frustrating because I actually do know what I'm talking about, and I can literally post something in there, and then like half of the group like argues with me. And I'm like, I'm an EPA licensed asbestos building inspector, and these guys are literally just out there winging it. It's crazy. I mean, there's a show I watched 5 minutes of. It was so funny. HGTV is called Home Inspector Joe. Have you seen it? First of all, the guy is giving advice on what to negotiate. He's giving advice on pricing. If there was a realtor there, they'd be pulling their hair out, right? So he also goes into a kind of a crawl space with a pipe, and the pipe is insulation. And the first thing he says that's wrong is that's definitely asbestos. You don't know that until it's tested. And two, that definitely has to come out and be remediated. Also not true. Asbestos is there's asbestos in a lot of places, and as long as it's not being disturbed, it's not causing any issues. So if you have asbestos insulation around a pipe in a crawl space where no one ever goes, and it's not until you decide to actually remove the asbestos insulation and replace it, it's not a thing. Like it's also, here's the other thing that comes up is we'll have people sometimes call us after the home inspection go, well, we were doing some testing and we found asbestos, the home inspector didn't bring it up. So let me explain to you, there have been over 3,000 building products over the years that have asbestos in them. And it is not part of a home inspection to try and figure that out. I'm gonna explain why in a second, but it's not and here's the thing, it's still in products that are sold today. So you can go down to Home Depot and get joint compound, and guess what? Some of them have asbestos in them. Now, first of all, what's with this asbestos? So first problem is, when the asbestos fibers, so it's called friable, when you take a material, like if I picked up this phone, not friable. If I pick up, breaky old insulation and it falls apart, that's friable. And what happens is all those fibers become airborne, and we can breathe them in. So asbestos causes lung cancer, asbestosis, and mesothelioma. Did I say that right? Mesothelioma. I feel like I'm slurring on that one a little bit. And so basically, it's just really bad for your lungs. And what asbestos actually is a rock that is mined. So why is it used everywhere? Well, the reason it's used is because it's got a bunch of great properties. So it doesn't transfer heat, it doesn't transfer electricity, it's actually pretty cheap. There's a lot of good things about it until we realized, oh crap, when we breathe it in, it's eventually killing you down the road. Now, little tidbit here. You'll never see, you see commercials by those big law firms that are selling your information and there's billions been blah, blah, blah. It's always mesothelioma, right? Do you know why that is? I'm gonna tell you why that is. It's because lung cancer and asbestosis comes from long-term exposure to asbestos. So years, maybe you worked in shipyards, you worked in just these industrial type things where it was far more common, or maybe you renovated houses for the last 30 years, you flipped houses. That would be a long-term exposure. But mesothelioma, the reason that the attorneys attack it is, it's only one-time exposure. So if you have it, you only had to be exposed to asbestos one time. Much easier for the lawyers to present a case where you only had to be presented one time with asbestos rather than getting into the minutia of what's a long enough long-term exposure for the other two. So that's what asbestos is, that's why it's bad. So here's the rules behind it. Depending on what state you're watching this in, commercial buildings, which would be just anything that's not really single family, and there's some states have some subtle differences, 4-plexes, 8-plexes, stuff like that. You could find your specific rules of what's considered a commercial building. But basically, if you're gonna renovate more than 160 square feet of anything in that building, you then have to do like an EPA asbestos assessment. And what that means is, if you're doing under 1,000 square feet, remember 3 samples, 1,000 to 5,000 square feet is 5 samples, and then above 5,000 square feet is 7 samples. Now here's the thing, here's the kicker, this is why it gets so expensive. 3, 5, and 7 samples per material disturbed. So that means in a bathroom, you've got the tiles, you got the mastic on the back of the tiles, you have the sheathing on the electrical wiring, you have drywall, you have joint compound, you have maybe the sealant used to seal the toilet, you have a different kind of tiles around the tub than you have in the floor. I mean, the list goes on and on. Even if you're a small bathroom, you've got seven types of material that need to be sampled, and then let's just say it's 3 each. That's 21 samples. And just from the lab, I mean, we're probably going to get charged $30, $50 per sample. And so then you're looking at, a cost of $1,000 to $1,500 for the homeowner for us to come out, have the license, have the certification, have the firm license, have the training, have the tools, have the know-how, and then to have the lab results and get the write-up. Now, here's the key is, it's not like mold where you're kind of like exploring. The idea is, let's just say you had to do this wall and we're going to do 3 samples. We literally have to prove that we're taking 3 random samples, because what we're trying to do is take samples in a random way that says, look, we just sporadically took samples. We want all the samples to come back negative, and that way we could say, okay, all that material did not have asbestos in it. Okay, so that was for commercial buildings. You're going, yeah, but what about my house? So the EPA has regulated commercial buildings. The EPA did not federally regulate individual residential houses. They've left it up to each state. So I'm gonna give you 2 examples that I'm abundantly familiar with. In Arizona, no requirements. Do whatever you want. Now, let me tell you why that might be a bad idea, but you could just basically move forward in a house and then, do whatever you need to do. You might still disturb asbestos, and it might be a good idea to test, but again, there's no requirement from the state legally for you to do it. You go a little north to Colorado, they have taken the EPA's rules and basically transposed them into the residential world. And so if you're going to disturb more than 32 square feet of material, same thing, 3, 5, and 7, all the materials. And 32 square feet is not a lot. It's like a 5 by 6 square, right? And a lot of people don't know this, but here's what people really don't know. It doesn't matter what year the house is built. People literally will stand in front of my classes and argue with me and tell me that I'm wrong. And I give them the state's website, and I can give them the EPA's website, and it doesn't matter what year the house is built. The only way to get around not sampling, if you're going to disturb those bigger areas, is by either having a letter from the architect or the engineer, the builder, that says we guarantee we didn't use any asbestos-containing materials in the building of your house or structure. So 1, good luck getting that, right? And 2, and by the way, we have found asbestos in newer houses. Like I said, it's still a thing that's being sold. Like, it was made illegal for about a year back in, I think, the late 70s, early 80s, but then it was just such a headache that they basically grandfathered all that old stuff in. And so, 50% of the time in joint compound and drywall in a house built in the 80s and newer, we do find asbestos all the time. And so basically what happens then, once you do find asbestos, just like when you find mold, you want to set up containments, air filters, people are going to wear protective stuff. And what you're trying to do is, if we know this wall has asbestos, when we take the wall down, we want all of that inside of a containment so those asbestos fibers don't get spread throughout the rest of the house, right? And then we breathe them in. Okay, so you're worried, right? You're buying a 1975 house, doesn't matter what part of the country, and maybe they didn't realize the thing about asbestos, and you're like, well, what can I do? So there are some air samples where we could take dust samples from, if there's dust in the corner, dust near the HVAC, dust near where the filter is before the HVAC system, and they're expensive. It's probably going to run $600, $700. And if there's asbestos fibers found, like let's just see, they renovated the kitchen, but they didn't take any precautions and do any testing beforehand. And again, I haven't actually had to experience this yet, but what I was told by asbestos remediation companies was that if any of those are basically positive, negative tests. So if they come back with asbestos sample with a positive for asbestos, they said that it is literally cheaper to just replace the entire HVAC system rather than trying to clean it, because you'll never get it perfectly clean in the system from that. So that's the truth about asbestos. And again, I don't say all that to scare you. It's a real thing. It's probably happens everywhere, depending on where you are. Like what I'll do, as far as it relates to the home inspection business, when we're doing a home inspection, let's say it's a 70s, 80 house, and there's that asbestos popcorn ceiling, and I'm here in Arizona where there are no rules on the residential side. Again, it's not part of the inspection report because I don't want to scare anybody, and I don't know, but I'll go, hey, and here's the other thing. You're not normally going to test for asbestos through the home inspection process because you're literally cutting holes in the wall and taking little pieces of wall down to the lab. So the people selling the house, they're not too jazzed about that. And they don't want you doing asbestos sampling so that you could just say, hey, we found asbestos and here's the holes in your walls, we're canceling the contract, and now they got to report, yes, we have asbestos. So the whole thing gets all jacked up. When there's like popcorn ceiling or tiles or things that are I'll go, hey, listen, if you're gonna go to remove that, you might want to have a company like ours come out and do some testing, because even though it's not required, it's probably still a good idea before you just start chopping that up. You can take the precautions that are necessary. It's gonna cost a little more, but at least nobody will have lung problems from it. Okay, last thing. In the states where there are requirements and people see videos like this and they understand, oh, asbestos is this thing I want to worry about, they go, well, can you test the house for asbestos? And you're like, well, what are you planning on renovating? Because like I've already explained, 3, 5, and 7 per material, like one, it adds up really quickly, and 2, like the way to do it is literally take like a core sample and we take that down to the lab. There's a hole in the wall and we patch them up. But again, that doesn't really work in the home inspection process while some third party still owns the house and you haven't bought it yet. But when we do get called in, when a house, let's say there's an 1890s house and it's going to be, leveled in order to make way for like one of those 3-story modern houses, we get called in there and we have to do the entire house. And now I'm going to give you one more little tidbit. Not only do we do the whole house, but you actually have to sample the ground underneath, because some houses were built on old landfills. So I can just tell you right now, if you have to, if the ground underneath the house comes back with asbestos, it gets really expensive. But those demo projects where we're doing, like, I'm talking about tar on the roof, felt paper on the roof, any insulation material. These are, and if that drywall doesn't match that drywall, those are 2 separate materials. Because again, we don't know. One could have been installed in 1890, another one installed in 1940. We just don't have the answers. Even weirder, I did one where it was a retail setting. It looked like it was a call center, and it had like linoleum-looking flooring, and had blue, red, and white floor tiles that were clearly all installed at the same time. Well, guess what that meant? 7 samples for the white, 5 for the blue, 5 for the red, because we have to prove that there's no difference in all the materials. So that's the right way we had to do that. So the final point was, when you demo a house, and we do actually literally test every single material in the house, you're talking about like $4 to $6 grand, because we're there literally 6, 7, 8 hours. Because you imagine the documentation we have to do of all of the samples and all the materials and how it all adds up and where it was taken from. Because if one comes back positive, we got to know where that was. So it's a big ordeal. And again, we're talking about like 100 plus, maybe 150, 200 samples that we have to pay the lab to analyze all of them. So now you know way more than you ever wanted to know about asbestos. I know that now. But the good news is, if you need help or you need advice, or you just need to talk to someone to talk your client through the realities behind it and how it all works, you know where to come. So I appreciate you hanging in there while this video ran a little long, and I'll see you in the next training.